Hello and welcome to One Cool Thing, PC Mag's daily show where we show you one cool thing which we are testing out here in the PC Mag Labs. I'm Sasha Sieg and this is Jim Fisher. If you are watching us live on Facebook, please ask questions, make comments. Social Pete here will read out your questions and comments to us and we will have a dialogue. If you are watching us later on YouTube, please like and subscribe. We have a new One Cool Thing every weekday on PC Mag's YouTube channel. I am very, very excited for today's product. Today's product is very exciting because it is 5 stars. Now here at PC Mag, we review thousands, literally thousands of products a year. And I would say only a handful. You could probably count them on 2 hands, the number in those thousands of products that get 5 stars. And yet, this Sony a7 III camera, 5 stars. What does it all mean, Jim?
It means it's really good.
Okay.
It's more in terms of full frame cameras. This is at the lower end of the price spectrum. You can get older models for less. The Sony a7 II is still on sale at $1,400. Canon 60 Mark II is a little bit less. I think it's been discounted at this point from its $2,000 MSRP. Nikon D750 selling for a little bit less than $2,000. Original Sony a7 still on sale for $800, which is something I couldn't even imagine a couple years ago. But for $2,000, this camera competes with models that cost twice as much.
Okay, and now to start out, I think we need to describe what the universe is for this camera, because we're talking specifically about full frame mirrorless cameras, right?
Yeah, and you know what? Sony's the only one. Sony and Leica are the only ones in the game for full frame mirrorless. So we talk about this in comparison with SLRs as well.
Okay.
And I am talking about this running circles around full frame SLRs that cost $2,000.
And now when you talk about running circles, are we talking about image quality? Are we talking about features?
Image quality, you're getting a slight tick up in this from other full frame models with 24 megapixel image sensors, because this is the first we've seen, the second we've seen other than the Sony A9, which is a $4,500 camera with a backlit CMOS sensor full frame. So you get about a stop better low light quality than you would say from the Nikon D750, which has an aging, I made 2 stops from the 750, which has an aging 24 megapixel Sony sensor in it, full frame. Image quality, you know, it's, as long as you don't need the extra resolution from 45 megapixel, 50 megapixel cameras, this is phenomenal. Autofocus. Almost the entirety of the sensor is covered by autofocus points, and it can track subjects at 10 frames per second. SLRs typically have autofocus restricted kind of to the central area of the frame, unless you move up to the super expensive models or smaller sensor sizes, where you get a little wider coverage. Shoots at 10 frames per second, shoots 4K video with the same focus speed as for stills.
Now, is 10 frames per second unusually good at this price range?
Yeah. No, to put this in perspective, the Canon 5D Mark IV, which is the Canon, the $3,500 Pro Canon body, is 7 frames per second.
Okay.
The Nikon D750, which is the similar price to this in the Nikon world, is 5.5 frames a second. And
now, I also understand that we were saying earlier that when you're shooting video, you almost can't get better than this, can you? It's
really good. I mean, you've got the depth of field control you get with the full frame sensor. So if you put like an f1.4 lens on this, you can like do crazy bokeh and rack from one subject to another. It takes a 6K feed from the sensor and downsamples it to 4K. So you get really crisp, sharp video, better than the 7R2, the 7R3 in resolution when using the full frame width. And it's, the Sony has a specialized video camera, the A7S II, which still uses the older body design and smaller battery capacity. And that's got a 12 megapixel sensor, so that's native 4K, which, this is, unless you're shooting in really low light where the native 12 megapixel sensor kind of betters it, this is going to give you better video.
What are your frame rate options when you're shooting video?
24 or 30 at 4K, up to 120 FPS at 1080p.
Okay. Let's take a question.
Did you ever review a camera called the Light L16? Someone's asking you to contrast these two.
The Light L16 is one of those cameras that is a concept. It's on sale. You can theoretically buy it. I saw a pre-production demo with the CEO a couple years ago at Photo Plus, and looked at it again at CES, where it still wasn't ready for prime time about 2 years ago. The Light L16 uses a bunch of tiny sensors to give you multiple focal lengths and stitch together high quality images. I've not personally shot with it. The images I've seen online, the reviews I've seen online, I believe Jaron Schneider from Imaging Resource did a really good piece on it, and I want to say David Pierce wrote one when he was still at Wired that are worth reading. Does not look like it's something you'd want to spend $2,000 on. I haven't shot with it personally, a final version, but from what I've seen, I wouldn't spend my money on it.
I mean, it sounds like what you're describing is kind of version 1.0 of an edgy technology.
It's not even that. It's like an alpha version or beta version of something that is not supposed to be a consumer product, but they made more and more noise making a consumer product out of it. So now, the next step is Google and Apple, and everybody's going to license that tech for smartphones.
Gotcha.
It's the multi-lens computational photography thing.
Okay, what's the next question out there?
Where did you take all the test shots for the review?
I went out to Las Vegas. Sony set up a shooting event. PC Mag paid for me to go out there and stay during WPPI, the Wedding Photographer's Photo Show. So I got the first look I was at the press conference when they announced this. They handed me the camera right afterwards, and I got shooting with it. We did some portrait shots in a studio, some dune buggies out in the desert, and did a helicopter trip to the Grand Canyon.
So yeah, let's take a look at some of those test shots, and you can talk about how they show what the particular strengths of this camera are.
Sure.
Going into the review. Okay.
Well, there's a good dynamic range example. I exposed that for the shadows shooting raw, and I was able to pull up the highlights, make sure the highlights weren't overblown, and pull up the detail there in the shadows of the grass. This is from the Grand Canyon. This is something where you really show what the sensor can do as far as dynamic range goes, pulling in details from the shadows as well as preserving the highlights.
Okay. And now here's one of those portraits.
Yeah, and that's actually, not even a really super bokeh-y portrait that's shot with the 24 to 105 millimeter lens, which is on here right now. It's an f4 lens. I just got, got the model to look right into the lens and shot him. He had a nice beardy biker look going on.
Okay. And now you said you were dune buggying?
Yeah, that's going to show you the autofocus tracking at 10 frames per second. You can really, I was shooting sequences of this, and the camera was doing a great job keeping the buggy in focus every time.
Okay. Let's talk a little about controls and ports here.
Let's do that. Let's just go back 1 second.
You want to do one more?
No, I just want to mention one thing about the portrait shooting. Sony's got a feature called IAF, which is eye-based autofocus. So holding down the rear center button on here while framing up a portrait, the autofocus system will automatically try to identify eyes just to get that focus right on the iris.
Okay, so yeah, let's talk about some of the controls and options on here.
Sure. We have a tilting touchscreen LCD. It is the type that tilts up and tilts down. It does not swing out to the side, which is a little bit of a downer for being such a great video camera. You can't kind of get that forward-facing vlog style or documentary style going on.
It is a little funny because I just a week or two ago on this show, I remember we were talking about a camera that tilts out to the side,
the Fujifilm, yeah,
but not up.
Yeah. That's just is like a half measure there to do that. I really want to see a true vari-angle. That's one of my small complaints about the camera.
Okay.
You have a little. This is new to the A7 III's little focus selector. Will let you change your focus point around.
Here, let's take it to the product camera here.
We'll let you change your focus point around. You have front and rear control dials. You have a dedicated EV dial on top. This dial here can be used for direct control of ISO or anything else you want to map to it. C, anything you see here is C, or any of these directional presses can be remapped in the software, in the menu system. There are a couple programmable buttons on the top. There's a lot of controls.
Now, is this pretty much the same as the previous generation of Sony cameras, or has anything changed in terms of the body design?
The battery is much larger.
Okay.
Yeah, we went from the W battery to the Z battery, the Z battery. The last time we did one of these videos, someone said I said C. Now it's Z for Z, as our British friends say, and it's a much larger battery than the old W battery. Rated for 700 plus shots by SEPA.
Is that to support the faster burst shooting?
Yes, there's that, and there's just also the older A7 models, the 2 generation, the battery life is, you really want to carry 3 or 4 batteries with you, especially if you're using this to shoot an event. I mean, if you're a wedding photographer, this is a very attractive camera. Between the IAF, the fast autofocus, the low light performance, it's what you want.
Let's take another question.
Muchmore says he doesn't like that it weighs a half pound more than the original A7. Does that matter to you?
No. Michael Muchmore is very specific in his tastes and
Yes.
concerns. The body is 1.4 pounds, which is a good pound lighter than any SLR that is comparable spec.
But I mean, come on, Michael Muchmore likes Bing. Do you want to listen to that
Yeah.
guy? Yeah. He loves Bing.
And Microsoft Edge, right?
Yeah,
that's not
absolutely,
It's not even a
absolutely.
thing I knew existed.
The next time I have Muchmore on the show,
Yeah.
he's gonna take me out for that. So going back to the review as a whole, who wants to step up to this camera, and what would you step up from this camera to? Because other than having yet more megapixels, this sounds like pretty much the ideal.
Right. No, and the 24 megapixel resolution we've kind of settled in on that as what full frames are, and that's been since the first Alpha 7 A7 has been a 24 megapixel sensor for the basic model. They've just gotten better over the years. Someone stepping up is someone who is a pro who has aging gear that is either already invested in the Sony system or has a Nikon or Canon SLR, and they're frustrated by the prices you pay for the pro models and the fact that Canon and Nikon have been very, very slow to adopt mirrorless technology.
This was going to be one of my next question actually would be, can this win some people away from Canon and Nikon?
We've been seeing that. Lens Rentals published some information last year. They're a very popular rental site, and a lot of pros rent gear. And the Sony lenses now are renting better than the Nikon lenses.
Whoa.
So they're renting more of those out, which makes you think that, well, there's an installed base there of people who care enough about photography to rent equipment.
Okay.
And pros will rent equipment for specific jobs. Enthusiasts will rent equipment before they buy it, or if it's just they want something for one shop and they don't want to spend, $1,200 on a lens or $2,000 on a specific lens.
Okay, and for enthusiasts who are, maybe used to spending between $1,000 and $2,000 for a camera, why would they want to step up to this?
Well, now you don't have to make the choice at this price point, between fast burst shooting and an APS-C or micro four thirds smaller sensor and a full frame sensor. Traditionally, the full frame cameras in this price range have been a little slower to focus and shoot. Now you've got superlative autofocus in this, almost as good as the A9. The same coverage, not quite the same tracking capability because it doesn't shoot at 20, so the readout's not quite as quick. But it's really good autofocus and versatile burst rate. If you're shooting wildlife, this is something you can take out with a long lens and use. Sorry, what was the?
Well, no, I was just saying basically the folks who have been using micro four thirds,
Yep.
or maybe entry level DSLRs in the 1,000 to 2,000 range.
Yeah,
stepping up to this.
It's easy to talk about the full frame sensor, but then you see it. You take the lens
gigantic.
off, and it's like it's as big as a film frame.
It's ridiculous.
And we're used, consumers have been used to APS-C SLRs for a long, long time, and it's been, I want to say, a good 4 years, 6 years? I'm trying to think what year the Canon 6D came out. The year the Canon 6D and the Nikon D600 came out right before Photokina at the same time which I want to say was 2014. That was the first time that full frame photography was really democratized, and that you could go out and spend $2,000 instead of $3,000 or $4,000 on a body and get the full frame digital experience. And those cameras at the time, were great, but they're showing their age. Their resolution, their sensors are still good, but their autofocus coverage is kind of a joke compared to what we see today.
And so now you have that full frame image quality with some of the speed and flexibility of the APS-C cameras.
Right, and you've got 4K in this one, which the first two A7 models did not have. So that's a big upgrade as far as video goes. You've got the 1080p slow motion. If you shoot at 120 frames per second, there's an S&Q mode here on the dial. That'll play back at 1/5 speed. So that's pretty dramatic slow motion.
Great. Let's take some more questions.
How does it get 5 stars with that UI?
Well, I talk about the UI. Sony's got a long way to go as far as the menu system goes. The addition of the My Menu function, which is a customizable page at the end, goes a long way to make me overlook that. It gets 5 stars not because it's perfect. There are a lot of cons there, as Sasha pointed out before. We were talking before the show about how does a camera with this many cons get 5 stars? It's because
we were debating our theory of 5 stars, basically.
It's so much further ahead than the other models at this price point that I just thought it was a good statement to make.
Yep.
I mean, would you be, if I had given it 4.5 stars editor's choice, would you be saying, well, that camera should have gotten 5 stars, or how can, I'm not going to buy that camera because it didn't get 5 stars? It's not really what it's about.
Any more questions out there? Okay, so if you have $2,000 to spend on a camera body, PC Mag says the camera you should buy is the Sony a7 III, hands down. In this price range, this is the camera, right?
That is the camera.
Okay. The full review is up on PCMag.com. Very rare 5-star review, lots of image examples, as always, in Jim's very thorough reviews. Thank you all for watching. This has been One Cool Thing. If you are watching us on Facebook, please return at 10 a.m. Eastern tomorrow. We'll have another cool thing. If you're watching us on YouTube, please return anytime you like. Please like and subscribe. Every day we'll have another cool thing for you.